the battery's about to run out. I don't know whose phone it is, though.
Okay. Thank you. You can have a seat. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Mrs. Sharon Clark Rowley, wife of the Honorable Dr. Christopher Rowley, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Douglas Wilbert Slater, Assistant Secretary General to CARICOM, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, the EU Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Alison Drayton, Director, UNFPA Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, and Dr. Tamika Romeo, Gender Lead and Gender and Child Affairs. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning. I am Tishon Rose Whittle, and I am UNFPA's Gender-Based Violence and Emergencies Coordinator, and it is my absolute pleasure, it is my honor to be your host for the next 2 days. Before we get into our program, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules with you. Each day we have our meeting in Regency Room 3, but we will also use breakout rooms on the second day. Of course, I will make you aware of this when it's necessary. And let's just get the elephant out of the room. We know it's a new normal. Some people are wearing masks, some people are not. The choice is absolutely up to you. Okay? I'm asking also, the meeting is going to be recorded. So I'm asking simply to place your phones on vibrate where possible. We're also having persons joining us online. Please mute your mics. If you have any questions, simply put it into the chat and it will be tended to. If at the end of the day or during the course of the period you do need any support, we have our staff members who are here ready to serve you. They were there at the registration point and they are there throughout the day to get you through this process. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am completely honored and filled with pride to be here. This is such a groundbreaking meeting that we're going to have over the next 2 days. Let me quickly get into the program. So each session is divided into 6 parts. We will begin with opening remarks from our specially invited guests on the stage, and then we will move swiftly to the picture-taking session and a coffee break. After this, we'll proceed to presentations on the Essential Service Package and the Community of Practice. In this session, we will look at the steps taken, the journey taken to get to this point, and also the objectives and raison d'etre of the Community of Practice. Session 3 will be dedicated to understanding the lessons learned of the implementation of the ESP in the region. And then we break for lunch. We have a 90-minute lunch session. We will come back to the afternoon and open with a panel discussion and a sharing of country experiences from St. Lucia and also Trinidad and Tobago. And then there's also a next coffee break, 50 minutes just to refresh yourselves. And we come back again for session 5, where there will be a presentation on the regional assessment done by the education sector and led by UNICEF. For the last session of today, we welcome our UN sisters, and they will be joining us online, where they will present their work on the Regional Spotlight Initiative and really explain their position within the Essential Service Package. So now that I've given you the housekeeping, a brief rundown of the agenda, we are now going to hear from our first guest. It is my immense pleasure to welcome to you our speaker, who's a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a medical doctor by passion, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the current Assistant Secretary General, Directorate of Human and Social Development of CARICOM, the Honorable Dr. Douglas William Slater. Please put your hands together to welcome him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wish to acknowledge the presence of the First Lady of Trinidad and Tobago, also of the other colleagues at the head table, Ms. Alison Drayton, Director, UNFPA, Sub-Regional Office of the Caribbean, also His Excellency Peter Cavendish, EU Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. We also have with us here Dr. Tamika Romeo, Gender Lead, Gender and Child Affairs Division of the Office of the Prime Minister, and Mr. Muwakil. He is a National Spotlight Champion, and we are very pleased to have a champion who is not the same gender of the majority of us here. Okay, so as you heard, my name is Douglas Slater, and it is my distinct pleasure to be here participating in this event with you. So I'm so pleased to participate in the launch of the Essential Services Package and Community of Practice for the region, and to bring greetings on behalf of Secretary General Dr. Carla Barnett, who has sent her best wishes for a successful meeting. I wish first to commend the United Nations Fund for Population and Development, the UNFPA, in partnership with us, the CARICOM Secretariat, for leading this initiative that aims to provide greater access to a coordinated set of essential and quality multisectoral services for all women and girls who have experienced gender-based violence. The launch today builds on an initial engagement that was held in November 21, where key stakeholders in the region, from national gender machineries, including some of you, such as well as from social services, health, justice, and policing, governance and coordination, and the education sectors, and UN partner agencies participated in a virtual two-day regional inception workshop. Well, we know why it was virtual: COVID. That workshop, you would recall, agreed on the ESP and CoP terms of reference, shared experiences, and discussed the challenges the region faces in the implementation of the ESP at the national level. The creation of an ESP CoP in the region is one of the many activities being implemented under the Spotlight Initiative, which is a global multi-year partnership between the EU, the European Union, and the United Nations. Spotlight represents an unprecedented global effort to invest in gender equality and women's empowerment as both a precondition and driver to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Through this effort, the aim is to eliminate violence against women and girls, the population most at risk of and disproportionately affected by all forms of gender-based violence. The Regional Spotlight Initiative has envisioned the ESP CoP as one of its priorities to promote exchange, cooperation, and learning while setting the minimum standards for addressing and preventing gender-based violence in emergency response and programming. The need for an ESP CoP cannot be overstated, especially in a region that is highly prone to disasters, such as hurricanes, and as you know, we are entering that season, and the recent eruption of La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, my homeland. This was reiterated when ministers with responsibility for gender affairs and directors met virtually and agreed on the CARICOM statement preparatory to the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women held at the United Nations in March 2022. The meeting expressed concern that women and girls are at risk for sexual assault and rape during emergencies, especially if food, water, or fuel sources are far from settlements or located in poorly lit, unsafe areas, or where emergency shelter management is not properly designed and effectively implemented. Women and girls are typically more physically vulnerable and less mobile than men, and often find themselves exposed to violence as they carry out their gender-specific roles as caregivers, providers, and laborers, along with other unpaid care work. Member states also acknowledge that increased economic pressure on the household also increases and normalizes family violence, as evidenced during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, and urge that more mechanisms be put in place to support women and girls to be more resilient in the face of climatic and other shocks and hazards. The United Nations Joint Global Programme on Essential Services for Women and Girls who are at risk of violence identifies the services to be provided by the health, social services, police, and justice sectors as the essential services, as well as coordination guidelines for the delivery of essential services and the governance of coordination processes and mechanisms. Service delivery guidelines for the core elements of each essential service have been identified to ensure the delivery of high-quality services, particularly in low and middle-income countries. Taken together, these elements make up what is known as the Essential Services Package, or ESP. The purpose of the package is to support countries as they work to design, implement, and review services for women and girls who are victims and survivors of violence in diverse settings and situations, not limited to emergencies. A package is a practical tool for countries, setting out a clear pathway on how to ensure the provision and coordination of quality services in all sectors. It is designed to ensure that the services are coordinated, to respond comprehensively, are women-centered, and where necessary, child-centered, and are accountable to victims and survivors. The ESP is not a one-size-fits-all package. Each member state will treat differently with the ESP because some may already have the prescribed services in place, and others may need to adopt existing ones or implement new services or take additional measures to meet these standards. The package allows each member state the latitude to set their local standards to ensure that the required services are of the highest quality for their population. The guidelines, while universally applicable, have been developed with low to medium income countries like ours in the Caribbean in mind. The provision, coordination, and governance of the essential health, police, justice, and social services modules can significantly mitigate the consequences that violence has on the well-being, health, and safety of women and girls and assist in the recovery and empowerment of women. And in some cases, proactively prevent violence from occurring or reoccurring. Essential services can diminish much of the economic costs of violence experienced by women, families, and communities, and can help to break the intergenerational cycle of violence, thereby contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The ESP aims to fill the gap between agreements made at the international level, to which many of our member states are parties, and implementation at national level of service provision and providing technical guidance on how to develop quality essential services. This includes commitments reflected in the agreed conclusions of the Commission on the Status of Women, just held in 2013. The ESP will be delivered by many of you present here today who are part of the community of practice, as collectively you will support implementation through effective governance and decision-making structures, and take steps to ensure active stakeholder engagement, collective ownership, and source funding for sustainability. It is therefore timely and relevant that today's meeting is being held to not only enroll you as official members of a regional community of practice, but also to introduce 2 knowledge products, including much-needed guidelines for the management of safe shelters for survivors and gender-based violence in the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean. I pledge on behalf of the Secretariat our unwavering support in this groundbreaking initiative, and I'm confident that this today meeting will facilitate a very rich exchange and strategic work plan as we continue to work purposefully and collaboratively to make the region, that is our CARICOM region, one where women and girls will live free of violence. I thank you and wish you every success.
Thank you, Dr. Slater, for your remarks. And I will now call to the stage a pioneer and a stalwart of the region, the Director of UNFPA, Sub-Regional Office of the Caribbean, Ms. Alison Drayton.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Douglas Slater, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, Directorate of Human and Social Development. Dr. Tamiko Romeo, Gender Lead, Gender and Child Affairs Division, Office of the Prime Minister, representing the Honorable Ayanna Webster Roy. His Excellency Peter Cavendish, Ambassador of the European Union to Trinidad and Tobago. Mrs. Sharon Clark Rowley, wife of the Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and National Spotlight Champion. Our specially invited guests, the members of Gender Machineries in the Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, a very warm good morning to you all. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here with you today in the beautiful Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and even more so as one of the first events post a very long 2.5-year lockdown. It's wonderful to be face-to-face with so many of you. Appropriate safety protocols enforced, of course. While from that perspective, this is a happy occasion, unfortunately, the issue we are here to confront is one that evokes quite the opposite emotion. Gender-based violence, in particular violence against women and girls, is a significant problem in this, our region. In fact, it is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violations. Last week, I spoke at 3 separate events aiming to address the very troubling problem that has had devastating effects on our women and girls. It was bad pre-pandemic. It is utterly appalling now. As Dr. Slater has noted, one of the consequences of the last 2 years is how many of the women and girls have been locked in with their abusers with absolutely no relief. And I've said the same thing at all of the events. Our numbers are not good. While the statistics show that globally 1 in every 4 women experience GBV, the prevalence surveys recently done in 6 countries show that in the Caribbean, it is the trend is 1 in 3, and in my own country of Guyana, always happy to lead, not always in the right direction, 1 in 2. And we all know that incidents of GBV and domestic violence are significantly underreported. So if this is what the surveys show, I think we can all confidently assume that the numbers are far worse than are being documented. And then when we see the headlines across the region, in many countries we are escalating from GBV to feminicide. We have to find a way to turn this around. The fact is that gender-based violence disproportionately affects women and girls. And while the prevention of these crimes lies mainly at the perpetrator's hands, a number of these incidents, including deaths, can be prevented by service providers who, with the proper training and resources, will be able to mitigate risks, protect survivors, and hold perpetrators accountable for their crimes. Because another problem for this region and also globally is this is a crime that is not often followed all the way through to the end. So you have continuous reoccurrence from the same people. So this is one of the reasons we are here today to launch the Essential Service Package Community of Practice. All of you here, experts from your various sectors, will endorse a regional roadmap that will allow our key regional institutions and national gender machineries across our region to establish standards and priorities to ensure that service provision for survivors of GBV is of the highest quality. This activity is being conducted under the Spotlight Initiative, which, as you all are aware, is a multi-year partnership between the European Union and the United Nations, which seeks to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. The Community of Practice will be the first regional GBV coordination mechanism for the Caribbean, and in fact, our region leading, as always, the first ever globally. And it will be co-chaired in its first year by CARICOM and UNFPA. Essential service providers such as healthcare workers and the police are among those with whom survivors of GBV first come into contact, and we therefore need to ensure that they are adequately trained and provided with sufficient resources to effectively support survivors and their protection, and in so doing, contribute to their empowerment and recovery. As the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, it is our responsibility to collaborate with partners and stakeholders such as CARICOM to ensure that services are carried out in safe, ethical, and confidential ways, and in a manner that is non-judgmental and non-discriminatory. Unfortunately, a lack of coordinated services, human resource capacity, and general mistrust of our systems results in underreporting, and the burden of care, healing, and recovery often lies on the already overburdened shoulders of the survivor. And this is yet another one of the reasons for this collaborative effort to establish the ESP CoP. We hope that this will provide a space where these regional institutions will sit together with representatives of National Gender Bureau across all the countries and territories of our region to exchange good practices adapt global standards, and facilitate South-South cooperation in the prevention and response of GBV. Something else that I would mention, because we talk often of the isolation experienced by the survivors, and I think we often overlook the isolation of those of you who are dealing with this issue from the service provision lens, particularly in small countries where it is not only an issue of resources, but of systems to mitigate. And so I also hope that this community of practice, this network, equips you all with a very strong, robust set of colleagues across the region with whom you can consult, discuss, brainstorm, and together we find solutions. I want to thank our implementing partner, CARICOM, for their continued commitment and invaluable contribution, and recognize the European Union for providing the funding for this initiative. We are indeed grateful for your tangible demonstration of support for this mission. Of course, without you, our partners, donors, and stakeholders, we would be unable to do the work necessary to help us all to achieve the transformative result of a world of zero gender-based violence and harmful practices. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to a very fruitful 2 days.
Thank you, Alison. And it's now my pleasure to welcome to the lectern our next speaker. She's a legal and clinical psychologist, a gender champion, a social advocate for victims of violent crime, and currently the gender support lead in the Gender and Child Division of the Office of the Prime Minister. And she's here to deliver a message on behalf of the Honourable Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. Please welcome Dr. Tamika Romeo to the lectern.
First Lady, Mrs. Sharon Clark-Rowley, National Spotlight Champion and member of the Spouses of CARICOM Leaders Action Network. His Excellency Peter Cavendish, European Union Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Douglas Slater, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, Directorate of Human Resources. Ms. Alison Drayton, Director, UNFPA Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean. Ms. Tashan Rose Whittle, GBVIE Subsector Coordinator, Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago Liaison Office. Mrs. Aurora Noguera Ramkisoon, Liaison Officer, United Nations Population Fund, Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean. Regional heads and representatives of the Directorates of Gender Affairs. Mr. Mohammed Muwakil, National Spotlight Champion. Specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to all in attendance. It is my honor to deliver these brief remarks to you today on behalf of the Honorable Ayanna Webster-Roy, Minister with Responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, as we launch the Essential Services Package for women and girls who are victims of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Fellow gender champions, this auspicious occasion has been long awaited, we can all agree, and sincere thanks are extended to the United Nations Population Fund for making this day a reality, as the agency's support is invaluable for the gender mainstreaming goals of the Gender Division. This project falls under the umbrella of the Spotlight Initiative, a global and multi-year partnership between the European Union and the United Nations. It focuses on investment in gender equality, the empowerment of women and girls, and the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is agreed that women and girls are disproportionately affected by the afflictions of physical and sexual violence. As a contribution to the responsive global efforts, the Regional Community of Practice, co-chaired by the UNFPA and the CARICOM Secretariat, was formed to promote the ESP, which focuses on the minimum standards for GBV in emergency prevention and responsive programming. This is certainly vital as we look forward to integrated social and community level approaches. In November 2021, the UNFPA and the CARICOM Secretariat conducted a virtual workshop with key regional institutions and national gender machineries of selected countries that are already in the process of implementing the ESP in their respective member states. It is notable that when the report was first presented to the Gender Division, it was also shared for review with members of the UN system, including PAHO, UNDP, UNICEF, and UN Women, seeking input based on their expertise and work in the justice, policing, health, and social services sectors. This brings us to today's first in-person meeting to officially launch the Regional Essential Services Package Community of Practice. In 2019, the Gender and Child Affairs Division confirmed the government's agreement to support the implementation of the ESP as a pilot project in Trinidad and Tobago. The division saw both value and integrative possibilities as the initiative offers the opportunity for a multi-sectoral approach to violence against women and girls, and an opportunity for survivors to access much-needed services in areas such as healthcare, justice, policing, social services, and the coordination and governance. With the continued support provided by UNFPA and Spotlight, we aim to become strengthened and better equipped to advance towards becoming a society where GBV is eradicated. We thank the supporting agencies for the opportunity to discuss the way forward in pursuit of gender-responsive coordination and the implementation of the pilot program of the ESP in Trinidad and Tobago. Most recently, atrocities against children have been revealed, and it raises a question as to what more needs to be done to prevent such occurrences. We must remain steadfast in what we are doing right and close the gaps in the child protection system. Attention must also be given to scaling up the education and sensitization of the population on all forms of violence and abuse. Rest assured that efforts to curb GBV have been prioritized by the Gender Division as we remain signatory to several international agreements, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women, and the implementation of policies and amendments to legislation such as the National Policy on Gender and Development, the Domestic Violence Act, and Sexual Offense Act. As such, we feel privileged to be one of the states tasked with the responsibility to pilot this project and improve responses to better safeguard women and girls from all forms of violence. Minister Webster Roy and the team at the Gender Affairs Division look forward to a successful rollout and coordinated effort which shall be undertaken and led by the UNFPA and other stakeholders. The division reiterates its commitment to propelling Trinidad and Tobago towards becoming a place where the rights of each citizen, each woman, man, boy, girl, and every human being are respected, protected, and assured. I thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Romeo. We now call to the stage His Excellency Peter Cavendish, EU Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome.
Madam Rowley, First Lady, National Spotlight Champion, Dr. Douglas Slater, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, Alison Drayton, Director, UNFPA Sub-Regional Office, and Dr. Romeo, General Gender Lead, Gender and Child Affairs Division, Office of Minister Webster Roy. I have to apologize that the Ambassador for Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean States, and CARICOM, Ambassador Valsiska, could not attend today due to previous commitments. Nonetheless, I wish to take great delight, great honour from the fact that we now have, for the first time in history, a woman who's the head of the European Parliament, at the same time as we have a woman who is the head of the European Commission. We have Roberta Metsola and Dr. van der Leyen, who are very prominent. I'm very pleased also for 10 of the 15 years that I've worked in the European External Action Service, we had Baroness Ashton and then Federica Mogherini as the High Representative Vice President of the European Union. In addition, I wish to point out that the head of the European Central Bank, Madame Lagarde, and the head of the World Bank, Madame Georgieva, are also women. Madame Georgieva is also a former European Commissioner. I think that we have proven that not only are we putting money towards these projects, substantively the institutions are respecting the importance of female engagement, female leadership, and the blessings that brings. Amongst those blessings, I actually started my career working for Commissioner Emma Bonino, a famous Italian activist. I think she's the only commissioner who's actually been condemned by the Pope. And Madame Bonino had the very touching habit of when she wanted to talk to you, she would grab you by the arms. I can tell you it's 20 times better to be grabbed by a female commissioner than a male commissioner. So it's so here we are here because advancing gender equality is a goal shared by the United Nations, the Caribbean and the European Union, and it is a central pillar of democratic, peaceful and prosperous societies. Within the European Union, the Gender Action Plan 3, which was adopted in 2020, guides our external actions. One of the General Action Plan ambitious targets is to have at least 85% of all new actions contributing to gender equality and women's empowerment by 2025. In addition, to help ensure freedom from all forms of gender-based violence as a key area of focus of the General Action Plan 3. We believe that every human being has the right to live a life free from all forms of violence. This is why the European Union allocated €500 million globally to the joint EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, out of which 50 million is devoted to the Caribbean region, and in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, 4.5 million. We consider it a substantive and impressive example that we do not only talk the talk, but we substantively put money forward towards achieving it. In addition to this, the European Union stands ready to mobilise all other means available to us to further support your efforts towards gender equality, notably by facilitating exchanges of expertise from the European Union and its member states when needed. The Spotlight Initiative has been implemented, as you know, in 6 countries in the Caribbean: Belize, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. Regrettably, violence against women and girls is a transnational flaw. Therefore, a regional programme complements the country ones, advancing regional advocacy with civil society organisations, transferring lessons learned, and to help address specific regional challenges. Gender-based violence was sadly too present in the Caribbean before COVID started, and on top of that, the emerging evidence points that this has worsened due to the impact of the pandemic, and in particular family violence, and particularly, sadly, against women and girls. This pervasive and complex problem needs a multi-sectoral response from our governments. That is why the European Union has welcomed the creation of a regional community of practice around essential services to be provided to all the women and girls who have experienced or that are experiencing gender-based violence, including health, psychological, social and justice services. So I would like to congratulate the Spotlight Initiative and the UNFPA in particular for promising this achievement. All the exchanges, cooperation and learning under this community of practice should help the victims of gender-based violence and family violence to receive the high quality and compassionate service that they deserve, and hopefully to never have to undergo similar destructive experiences again. This includes services provided in emergency situations, because we know that in times of crisis, natural disasters or war, those who are amongst the most vulnerable, i.e., sadly too often women and children, experience the hardest blows. We consider that all practitioners and care providers shall be supported and trained so that they're able to provide the best quality services possible. We also encourage the involvement of civil society organisations and community-based organisations, since they have a key role to play here as well. Victims and survivors need fully trusted community structures that they can visit for help to get out of such traumatising situations and to help to break the cycle of violence. Finally, let's try to provide the most comprehensive response possible by accompanying the services to survivors with a whole of society campaign to end the social stigma that often leads to shame, depression and abuse by family members and discriminatory laws and policies. The kind of actions that are needed are the ones that will make a real difference in the lives of the most vulnerable women and girls. And these are the changes that we all wish to see. Before I finish, I would like to reiterate the EU's full support to make the most of this endeavour. I hope that this community will help the different Caribbean countries to effectively deliver high-quality essential services to the victims and survivors of gender-based violence and family violence. Just as we have committed to $500 million under the current funding period, the European Union does not walk away from its commitments, and I'm very strongly of the opinion that the EU will continue to fund at an equivalent level going forwards. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ambassador. Distinguished guests, we will now switch gears a bit and allow one of our national spotlight champions to introduce his work under the Love Over Everything campaign and also his video, Oshun. Please welcome to the stage the lectern, poet, human rights advocate, lead singer and co-founder of Freetown Collective, and an ally, Mohammed Mawakil.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I would just like everyone just to close your eyes for a second. If you just bear with me, just close your eyes for a second. And just take a real deep breath with me. And exhale. Okay. Thank you for humoring me with that. I know that sometimes hearing all these words sent at you all day could kind of desensitize you to the fact that you all are actually here because there are people who are right now counting on each and every one of us to do our very best. I know how these conferences go, so I want you at any point in time that you feel as though the words have become too overwhelming, just close your eyes, take a deep breath, center yourself, and just remember why you started doing this in the first place. I'm not sure, am I supposed to introduce the video?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay, cool. Yes. So, my name is Mohammed Mawakil. I've been an artist living and working out of Trinidad for the last 17 years of my life. I have been performing music all over the world and spreading a message of love for the last 12 years. The artist draws lines constantly and goes past them, existing on the edges of what is known or accepted. The voice of the artist is essential because while historians, economists, bureaucrats, and politicians are mapping the hard fact of our civilization's history, we, the artists, are mapping the people's emotional history and their current states of flux. And these are essential or should be understood to be essential when it comes to national, regional, and international decision making. I once met this architect, Sir David Ajayi, and he created the Black History Museum in Chicago and many other buildings all over the world. And every single project that he did, he hired an artist from the region, whether it be a painter, whether it be a poet, to work with him. And this is an architect. And those two things seem so far apart. But the artist is existing in a space that is completely outside of where you all sit every single day. We're sitting on a mountain somewhere watching society as a whole, understanding its movement and understanding its emotional state. And if you're not conversing with us, you're missing a very big piece of it. So that's just a little plug for artists as I start. In the beginning of the pandemic, my niece was born. Beautiful, beautiful little black baby girl. Her name is Khadija. And one day she was sleeping by my grandmother. And I came into the room and I looked at her and I said, this little black girl is coming into a world that she doesn't even know how hostile it is. And she's just sitting there, just lying there, breathing, sleeping, dreaming in the ways only babies can. And I said, I want her to know that she will always be loved. And I have to encapsulate that in a song. And I wrote this song called Oshun. And I did not know at the time of writing the song what the song would do. So we wrote the song, and then over the pandemic, Freetown Collective also pivoted and opened a company called Idea Futures. The whole point of Idea Futures is to help corporate entities to spend their corporate social responsibility funds in ways that are more responsible. They go into communities, they build playgrounds, they hand out hampers, and sometimes that is deemed as enough. Sometimes. And we're just saying, we can help you because we're artists. We could think a little bit outside the box. And so we created this campaign along with associated brands called Love Over Everything. That's my hoodie. And Love Over Everything started as the idea of using the Oshun song that I had created to give grant funding to 3 female filmmakers from across the region to create work surrounding gender-based violence using their film expertise as well as the song as a bed for that. It's a video you will see soon. We then also said we wanted to focus specifically on one problem and try to fix that one thing because we knew we couldn't fix everything. And so we said, we found out that at the time, and I have some figures here, at the time, the Rape Crisis Society had 87 survivors who were waiting to see a counselor. So 87 people who were in trauma called the Rape Crisis Society and could not get to speak to someone because they did not have enough counselors. During COVID, it skyrocketed to 268 people, 110 of whom were children. So we were heartbroken by that. And we said, ooh, how can we assist? So we asked ABIL to allow us to come in and raise funds, try to galvanize people to raise funds to assist Rape Crisis Society and also an organization in Jamaica called E for Life. What we've managed to do is to give them another counselor. And during that time, in 2021, they saw 440 clients. They had 2,300 sessions. And unfortunately, as of last month, the number has actually risen now to 380 people who are waiting. Yeah? 169 of whom are children. There are people out there right now who are sitting, waiting for us to do our very best. We continue this year with the Love Over Everything program because now we want to focus on children. There are children who are not comforted by the situations that they find themselves in, and so we have moved forward to create something that I feel is a legacy project, a lullaby album. I was told by many Caribbean mothers that as they looked in the different stores, they couldn't find anything to put their children to sleep. It was all foreign material. So I was saying to myself, how do we now get into the minds of the children from a very early age? How do we sing things to soothe them, but also to give them the messages that we want? And so we've embarked on a lullaby album project. I seriously believe that politicians alone will not do it. Bureaucrats alone will not do it. And if you are not speaking to the artists who are mapping the emotional landscape of your countries, then you're missing out on a very big part of it. So anyone who wants to contact Freetown Collective can get us at wearefreetown@gmail.com or check us on Instagram. Like I said, I don't have a whole heap of time here this morning. This is what we have been doing and will continue to do. So thank you very much. I believe, so yeah, this is one of the 3 videos that we did for the Love Over Everything project. So thank you very much for your time.
Dearer to me than all the stars. So many wish but never reach. 'Cause when I'm falling and all the world seems dark, you help me find my peace. In the still of the night, I lay listening to you breathe. People search for heaven all their lives. How lucky am I? Heaven's breathing next to me. Oshun mi ba pishani. Oshun mi ba, yeah. Oshun mi ba, vijani. Arubita, yeah, 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 yeah. The sea has no answer, no, for the depth of this feeling. I will love you in the heat of the morning and the cool of the night. How blessed am I to know you like this. When you touch me, I feel free. People search for heaven all their lives. How lucky am I? Heaven's breathing next to me. Oh, should be God and all these angels know how I feel about you. God and all these angels know.
Okay, that was a bit heavy. Conflict is inevitable, but violence is a choice. Love over everything. I think right now we probably should take some deep breaths in. I need a few myself. So I called my friend and fellow troublemaker. So he's just going to help me introduce to the stage our, of course, especially most revered guest on stage, Mrs. Sharon Clark Rowley. It is such an honor to have you here. Give up your time. Please excuse me.
Tishan, I think we were all equally moved by that video, which went to the heart of what domestic violence is all about. Muhammad, you have one upon me. You can sing, I can't. So, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, European Union Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Alison Drayton, Director and Representative, UNFPA Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, Dr. Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Tamika Romeo, Gender Lead, Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Muhammad Muakil, National Champion Spotlight Initiative, Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Tishan Rose Whittle, government officials, directors of gender bureaus, members of the media, specially invited guests. Good morning to all of you. And to those of you who are not from Trinidad and Tobago, I welcome you to our country, and I hope that you have a productive and enjoyable stay with us for these next 2 days. I consider it an honor to have been invited to address you this morning at today's launch of the Essential Services Package Community of Practice under the Caribbean Spotlight Initiative, a global initiative of the United Nations, which has received generous support from the European Union. Thank you. Today's event represents an important milestone for the Caribbean, and I want to applaud the United Nations Population Fund and CARICOM for their dynamic leadership in establishing the community of practice. As we welcome government officials, gender affairs directors, representatives from the UN and civil society from across the Caribbean, we have a huge task ahead of us. We have to ensure that our women and girls who risk gender-based violence receive the essential services which they need to live free from such violence. We need to ensure that they realize their full potential. Our task is not insurmountable. Globally, we know that 1 in 3 women will experience some form of gender-based violence in their lives. In the Caribbean, studies published by UN Women in the Eastern Caribbean indicate that the average lifetime prevalence of interpartner violence is around 45%, with a significant risk for women who are victims of domestic violence being killed by intimate partners and family members. In Trinidad and Tobago, the figures are similar, with 30% of ever partnered women having experienced physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner in their life. 2 weeks ago, we in Trinidad and Tobago woke to the gruesome headlines in our daily newspapers that 3 women had been killed in 3 days. By the next day, that figure had risen to 4. 4 women in 4 days. I will admit to you that I was scared. Not so much for myself, but for my 2 daughters and for all the women and girls in our country, whatever their age, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their religion. I think of the primary school girl living in a rural community who comes home daily to witness her mother being mercilessly beaten by her father, too scared to tell anyone. I think of the 21-year-old woman raped and beaten with no one to turn to for help. And I think of the elderly woman who has been physically and emotionally abused for all of her adult life, but who accepts it as her lot in life. All of us gathered here today know these stories all too well. And as Muhammad just said, our women and our girls are hurting. These women suffer at the hands of men who believe that male dominance and gender inequality are the order of the day. Men who have absolutely no respect for women. It is said that they suffer from toxic masculinity. I call that a sugar-coated term for brutality. And there's no chromosome bias on my part here as I say that. We have a responsibility to protect those women and children among us who are most vulnerable. Silence and inaction are not options for any of us. We must be our sister's keeper. Today's event could not have come at a more opportune time for us. The United Nations Joint Global Programme on Essential Services for Women and Girls Subject to Violence provides an important framework for us to assist. The program will ensure that all women and girls who experience gender-based violence are provided with greater access to a coordinated set of essential and quality multi-sectoral services in health, social services, policing, and justice. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the essential services package. When there is a lack of supportive structures and services for victims and survivors, gender-based violence will be compounded. More so, when there is no exposure to preventative measures which address beliefs and practices that foster gender inequality. Under the package, service providers play a key role in empowering survivors and victims by disrupting the violence. Guidelines for the governance of coordination processes and mechanisms are examined, and service delivery guidelines for the core elements of each essential service are identified in order to ensure the delivery of high-quality services for women and girls experiencing violence. Some of you have started on this journey already. In that regard, I wish to acknowledge with great appreciation the countries present today, including Trinidad and Tobago, which have already mobilized resources and conducted ESP assessment reports. You have mapped your country's service delivery against the global standards contained in the ESP, and you have outlined clear action plans to fill the gaps and strengthen the position and the provision of services to our most vulnerable women and girls. If we are to achieve our global strategic commitment of zero gender-based violence, there is no doubt that it will take a whole-of-society approach where government, civil society, and international partners work hand in hand. At the end of your meeting tomorrow, I certainly look forward to hearing of your deliberations on lessons learned from implementing the package in the Caribbean, and I anxiously await receipt of the key identified priorities of the ESP CoP from 2022 to 2023. My hope is that those countries which are currently implementing the program will leave with renewed hope and inspiration about the impact that we can make, and that those yet to implement the program will leave strengthened with the resources and tools they require. I thank you for your commitment, and I am confident that together, with each of us playing our part, we can build a Caribbean in which all our women and girls can live in peace, free of abuse, free of harassment, and free of violence. I thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you, Madam First Lady. We're now going to have a brief pause where we'll have picture taking, yes, followed by a coffee break. So we just ask you to stay on the stage. Would you come as well? I'm now inviting the liaison officers to please join us on stage, as well as Mariana and Miss Williams. Anne-Marie. Do I announce? We are now going to have a small presentation for Mrs. Rowley, just to thank her for being present and giving of herself. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're inviting you to take pictures outside, the group photo. And this is also going to be our brief coffee break as well. Thank you. Wow. Okay, guys, I have one announcement. Please listen up. We are asking you to come back inside at 10:35. I know we have a tight program, but we really want to stick to it. So 10:35, we're back in here. Thank you.